Namaskar and welcome to Public Forum. I am Charu Karthike. We are talking about India-Afghanistan bilateral relations today. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was on a two-day visit to Kabul recently, and it was a very significant visit since it had come just after the killing of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Several gestures were made by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, both in terms of the announcements that he made and also in terms of the statements that he made in Kabul. So over the next 1 hour in this edition of Public Forum, I'll be trying to find out the significance of the recent visit of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh for India-Afghanistan relations, as well as its impact on the larger AFPAC process that we are seeing unfolding with every passing day. So over the next 1 hour, this is what we are going to talk about in this edition of Public Forum. And I have an extremely distinguished panel of experts in the studio with me today to talk about this subject. On my extreme left, Mr. Sreeram Chaulia, Vice Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs. Welcome to Public Forum, Mr. Chaulia. Next to him, Vishal Chandra, Associate Fellow, IDSA. Welcome, Vishal. And right here with me, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Editor, Hindustan Times. Welcome, Mr. Chaudhary. Mr. Chaulia, I would like to begin with you, beginning with the first things first, the significance of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit, firstly, as far as India-Afghanistan bilateral relations are concerned.
You know, the timing is quite opportune because it came after the killing of Osama bin Laden. And in that sense, there was already speculation about whether the end game has started. Some people are talking about the beginning of the end for the American occupation in Afghanistan. So I think the presence of the Prime Minister at that time sent out a message, a clear message that we continue to be engaged and that the political will of the Indian ruling establishment is clearly there to be present at its highest capacity, the head of government, and to show that if there is a vacuum developing, if there is a kind of situation where there will be an accelerated pullout in line with the elections in the US in 2012, then we are very much there. We are not shying away. So it also sent a strong message to sections of the Pakistani intelligence and military which would have felt that the beginning of the end has started, and you know the game is ours. And the field is ours to retake once the Americans leave, because that has been their strategy. I think that sent a very powerful message, and I did notice that it was covered internationally much more than his previous visit 6 years ago. So I think people have understood that it is significant in the sense that India is stepping up and saying that we are players and we cannot be ignored, be it through reconciliation process or in a final solution minus the Americans.
Mr. Chaulia, we'll talk about the other players later, but let's talk a little more about India. More than a year ago, when the Istanbul conference had happened, and all the key players involved who had been invited for discussing the AFPAC situation, rather the Afghan security situation, and India had been sidelined. There was a lot of furore. India had also registered protest diplomatically, but through diplomatic channels, that probably this is dangerous for the region if significant initiatives for AFPAC region, if India is being sidelined out of these kind of initiatives. Have we come back from that kind of a position? Are players involved in the AFPAC region, are they again realizing the significance of keeping India involved?
I absolutely think so, because in fact the Turkish Foreign Minister Davutoglu hosted an event around the time that the Prime Minister was in Afghanistan, and the Indian Foreign Secretary visited, and she attended this roundtable along with the other stakeholders. So in that sense, the Turks have made amends. And of course, Turkish are playing a very, very constructive and grand diplomatic role in the entire region now. And they're offering their good offices for several conflict resolution purposes. And I think even the United States, which used to feel hesitant about acknowledging India's role, has come around to thinking that as and when they start withdrawing, as Pramit was saying, the gap has to be filled in, if not with boots on the ground, but through other initiatives, through our infrastructure and economic development plans, as well as our human potential, our human capital, which can impart skills and such things. So I think there is no question that if at all there has to be nation building and reconstruction of Afghanistan after 3 decades, it has to be India, because it has a vibrant democratic system, it has the institutions which can be exported. Pakistan can at most export stunted intelligence system where there is tabs on people. I mean, governance issues in Afghanistan are critical. And although we are allies of the Karzai government, at the same time, it's clear in a free press like ours, we know from our readers know, our public knows that essentially Afghanistan is a kleptocracy. And the Transparency International ratings are just one indicator of how bad the governance is there. Right? It's basically a warlord system where they've parceled out power and apportioned it in provinces, and where the central government's writ hardly runs, and where it runs, it is mostly through kickbacks. So what we're talking about is India alone, among all these players in the region, has a kind of a stable democracy. We have warts and all. We are, I would say, the most liberal of all the societies in the region. And what Afghanistan needs after 3 decades is not more fundamentalism and more despotism, but more liberal democracy.
Our influence in nation-building efforts in Afghanistan are increasing. We have moved on from infrastructure to governance now. We have obviously, we have also hiked the aid that we are providing to Afghanistan, and also there's also a lot of direct investment of human capital as far as the nation-building activities in Afghanistan are concerned. But why do we continue to be hesitant as far as military aid is concerned? Even if it is a matter of training security personnel in Afghanistan, India continues to be hesitant of that. Why do you think that happens?
Well, we have a history of some misadventures that were thought about as Good Samaritan acts. 1987, the IPKF example is, I think, still 25 years now, a very searing one in the Indian psyche. And the kill rate and the loss of troops, and even the thought of having body bags coming back from Afghanistan draped in the tricolor is a very frightening one, because at the end of the day, we want to define ourselves as a traditional power that believes in non-interference in internal affairs of other countries, that we respect sovereignty. So even if the Karzai government invites us, technically that's not internationally legal in law, but still I think the belief is to stay out of foreign military misadventures that may prove to be costly, that may end up bringing more brickbats than because at the end of the day, I think any smart military analyst will agree that it is an unwinnable war insofar as Taliban are seen as proxies for the Pashtun community itself, and we already have had situations where India is perceived as anti-Pashtun, and having a presence with weapons on the ground will probably exacerbate these perceptions and increase the sectarian divisions in the country. And as I said, for domestic political reasons too, it makes for really bad consumption if we have actually committed to sending foreign troops. The only proactive example of using military force I can think about in recent years India has done away from its borders is the naval operation off the coast of Somalia for interdicting pirates.
Yeah.
But that has lesser casualty possibilities than boots on the ground in terrain that we are not very familiar with, and where we are likely to end up with a bloody nose.
Talk about this event in which we have seen a shift in India's stand during Prime Minister's visit. This is about Karzai's reconciliation strategy that he's been thinking about, of trying to split Taliban by trying to talk with the so-called good Taliban that he believes in. India, we know, had been opposed to it, and we saw a shift during this visit of Manmohan Singh. Do you see Karzai's this reconciliation strategy? Do you see the strategy bearing fruit in the recent time, near time to come?
Well, again, it all comes back to the cards that the Pakistanis hold. As you know, there were some mediators and some intermediaries between some faction of the Taliban and the Kabul government, and then some of them were, arrested unexpectedly, and then it all turned out to be a game of the ISA, which is keen on, preventing any kind of reconciliation to happen, which is beyond its vision. And so I think the problem is that the reconciliation efforts have some would say have stumbled, have not gone as far as, because they've been calling these loya jirgas and shuras and all these councils over time. But then the question is, are they really representative of Taliban? The Taliban itself seems to be pretty decentralized, except perhaps the commanding presence of Mullah Omar, who himself could be disobeyed by certain commanders on the ground, because they see themselves primarily as a national resistance movement against American occupation and American neo-imperialism. So in this kind of situation, I mean, I was just reading someone saying that for the Taliban, or for many of them at the grassroots, it is about the Americans and the Indians being the new Russians, and that we need to, counter their influence come what may, because they have colonial ambitions, and to hunker down here and to have permanent bases here.
Well, India has borne the brunt of that.
And we have paid with a heavy price, with blood and treasure.
Two big attacks in our embassy.
That's right. So the reconciliation efforts, I think, until the domestic balance of power changes, where one of the sides is significantly weakened. So right now it looks like a stalemate with go off the highways and the main roads, and it's all Taliban country, especially in the south. Kandahar, Helmand, and these places.
Yeah.
So it looks like until the domestic balance of power shifts significantly on one side or the other. If you look at the history of reconciliations and internal negotiations mediated by third parties across the world, you will find that it's not often the case that when there is evenly matched two sides,